Welcome to Decolonising Coaching. I'm very pleased to be offering this session as part of the African Executive Coaching Council's inaugural conference. This session will be in two parts, a 15-minute presentation followed by a conversation with my colleague Rosemary Campbell-Stevens. My name is Charmaine Roche, and I feel that in my work I honour my mother and father who emigrated from Jamaica in the 60s and brought up 5 children in very challenging circumstances. My success is their success, and I wish my work to contribute to an improved world that will be enjoyed by my grandchildren and great-grandchildren. I see myself as a social justice warrior, a compassionate disruptor, and a change agent in relation to my work in organisations and in relation to my role in the evolution of coaching. The article Decolonising Coaching, from which this presentation takes its name, is available on the conference website as a resource, and I hope that if you haven't read it in advance of this session, that you will be inspired to seek it out and read it following it. The process of decoloniality is about freedom from oppression. Part of that process is about foregrounding the voices that are normally marginalised, pushed aside and ignored. So I'm hoping that you have been attracted to this session because you have an interest in change and social justice as a goal for coaching. And this presentation and the framework that I want to share with you is precisely about redefining the purpose of coaching to serve social justice. I am in the second year of my PhD. You can see the title of the PhD at the top of this slide. And I'm currently in the middle of collecting data for a question which places the world of coaching as an oppressive context for Black, Indigenous and other coaches of colour, and asking the question, what needs to change for the world of coaching to take an anti-racist approach? There are 4 domains contributing participants for the research, and the aim is to publish a report which is being sponsored by the Henley School of Business in the summer of this year. Coaching for social justice represents 3 fundamental shifts from the dominant model of executive coaching. It challenges the current limitations also of the way in which executive coaching is researched. Generally, when executive coaching is subjected to academic or practitioner research, it is in order to prove its effectiveness. It's a positivist approach. What I am subjecting my practice to is critical research which challenges and questions the fundamental assumptions behind executive coaching. And in so doing, it redefines the purpose of coaching. One example of the way in which it challenges the current models of executive coaching and possibly all dominant forms of coaching is its challenge to the myth of neutrality. The coaches that I have spoken to in my research who come from a social justice perspective, as I do, would like to replace the concept of coach neutrality with transparency and intentionality. Transparency about what interests coaching is serving, and intentionality in being explicit about the social justice change agenda that coaching could offer if that is what we contract for when we enter into organisations. One of the other fundamental shifts I believe this framework presents is to the education of the coach. It is my belief that coaches need to be politically conscious. They need to understand history. They need to know how the inequities and inequalities and the way in which power is distributed in society and in organisations affects the clients they coach. The current colour blindness which dominates coaching is one of these examples. Without understanding the complexity of identity which we all bring to our roles, to our places in society, to the way in which our lived experience plays out, we cannot competently coach people who have been racialized by the process of colonization and imperialism. Not understanding this can do deep psychological harm when you're coaching for performance in organizations that are dominated by neoliberal performativity, which operates as a form of oppression, and white supremacy cultures, which operate as forms of oppression. Coaching for social justice needs social liberation psychology, which seeks to understand individuals within their social, political, cultural, and historical context. The dominant forms of psychology which currently inform coaching focus on the individual psychological resources that we bring to our roles, and focuses on increasing and improving our psychological profile, our psychological resources. Oppressive contexts, as I've referred to earlier in my presentation, oppressive contexts deplete psychological resources. It creates a form of internalized oppression. Social liberation psychology understands this and offers tools for working with it. The dominant forms of psychology that currently inform coaching have nothing to say about internalized oppression, for example. Coaches should be trained to access all forms of critical theory that provide a language for deconstructing dominant oppressive ideologies that masquerade as neutral or universal. Decoloniality is such a theory, critical race theory, feminist transformational leadership theory, and there are many others. So this domain of the model asserts that we need a social liberation psychology that grew out of the liberation movements in Latin America and Africa, the work of, for example, Frantz Fanon, Pablo Freire, just to mention two pioneers of social liberation psychology for the purposes of emancipating people from conditions of oppression. So this final domain, ethics as critical practice, brings us to the potential of ethics to challenge professional power. Through my activities as a researcher, I am challenging the professional power of coaching in its current form. And one of the basis of the current professional power of coaching is its assumption of neutrality. And I am using ethics as critical practice as an exercise in challenging, questioning, and probing what neutrality actually means, to expose it as a myth. That is ethics as critical practice. In my work with my clients, I also encourage them to challenge the ethics of the professional power that imposes a particular series of practices upon them that they find oppressive. It takes me back to the beginning of my journey that encouraged me to take the PhD, which was in coaching stressed professionals in the education sector who were being told by the media in the narrative that they were generating that their stress was generated by workload. My experience in coaching them told a different story. What they were experiencing was an existential clash between their ethics, social justice ethics, and the ethics of performativity in the cultures driven by neoliberal governmentality as defined by Foucault in his work on the oppressive forces of capitalism. And there is much literature to support this analysis. This isn't just my opinion. This clash in values is alerted to us through the concept of ethical stress. We feel that something is wrong, so we inquire into that feeling, investigate its source, and make an ethical choice as to how to respond. In that way, we can become empowered to be positive disruptors, to give a voice to our ethical concerns, rather than being driven out of the profession, either as coaches or in relation to the clients that we are coaching. To choose to stay and be positive disruptors where there is space, where we can create space in our organisations, in our professional domains to influence change. This, I believe, is a promise of coaching for social change and the ethical maturity that comes with this positioning, with this perspective, rather than merely working from ethical codes. Ethical codes are important but not sufficient. What is required is ethical maturity, the ability to work with the complexity of specific contexts and to navigate the ethical challenges created by the misuse of power. That is a promise of coaching for social change. This is the full model. It is a work in progress. I've covered the 4 main domains, and I hope that I will be able to, at some future occasion, share the work with you as it develops. At the centre of this diagram is my own activity as a researcher and a coach and a change agent within my own professional sphere. That original experience of ethical stress is what has brought me here. I am challenging the professional power of coaching and challenging it to serve a broader purpose, to serve an emancipatory purpose, to encourage the practices of freedom that we all need to be fully human.